Welcome, everyone, and happy Friday. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Heather Hooper, and I am the head of retirement for Loring Ward. And I'm so pleased to be here with Mike Allen from Securities Financial Management to talk about 5 common retirement planning challenges. Today's presentation will last for approximately 45 minutes with a 10-minute question and answer session at the end. To ask a question, please open your GoToWebinar control panel by clicking on the orange icon with an arrow. Type your question into the box and hit send. Please feel free to ask questions at any time during the presentation today. Your questions will not be viewable by other attendees and will be addressed during the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. Please note that all participants will be in listen-only mode. Also, if there's something specific that you would like to get out of today's session, please go ahead and type that into the chat box so we can ensure that we cover that point. Before we begin, allow me to offer a bit of background on Mike. Mike is a Florida native who grew up in Melbourne and graduated from Central Florida University. He is the managing partner for Securities Financial Management. And he holds his Certified Financial Planner designation. He's also an active member of the Financial Services Institute. When he originally started serving people's financial and retirement planning needs, his focus was on families with children with disabilities. Over time, he evolved the Special Needs Planning Division of his organization into general planning for all types of families and individuals. Mike and his wife Susan live in Cocoa, Florida, where they are raising 2 children, 1.5 cats, and 2 dogs. They are also active members at Indian River City United Methodist Church. But more so than anything, Mike is a longtime friend whose passion is in helping people live successful, fulfilling lives leading up to and all the way through retirement. And with that, we'll begin the presentation. Our agenda today is fairly simple. We have 5 specific challenges that we're going to be reviewing. The first is estimating how much money you will need in retirement. The second is discussing how you will spend your time in retirement. The third, considering longevity. 4 is covering the cost of health care and how that can impact your planning. And 5 is basic financial planning needs. We're also here, of course, to answer all of your questions. So we're going to start today with a general definition of retirement. We pulled this from Merriam-Webster's dictionary, and it doesn't really do a great job of how retirement is going to look and feel for people. It also uses the same word it is trying to define in the actual definition itself through the act of retiring or the state of being retired or the age at which one normally retires. But more so than anything, it seems as though this definition focuses purely on one point, which is the withdrawal from one's position or occupation from active working life, which isn't necessarily always the case, and it certainly doesn't cover all of the themes and common beliefs associated with retirement. There are 5 different influencers that will guide many of the decisions that you make throughout your retirement years. Each influencer alone has the ability to change all of the others, specifically bullet point number 4, which is how much health care will cost. So before we go into challenge number 1, Mike, you recently wrote a white paper on the 5 common challenges. What motivated you to write about this topic?
Sure. I've always been interested in the top challenges for clients in general and for retirement, and I wanted to see if it was more specific to any one group of individuals working for certain corporations. And I focused on Lockheed Martin. Yeah, I have quite a few clients that work there, and I thought that was a pretty good sample size. And I talked with current clients and also people that aren't clients through LinkedIn, and these 5 challenges came to play. And they, as I looked at those challenges, I realized that that they're not just for Lockheed Martin employees. These challenges are universal. Everybody in their different industries in life have different specific things, but broad broadly, these challenges fit everybody.
Great. Thanks for sharing. So let's go through challenge number 1. Do you know how much money you need to live comfortably in retirement? And I would say we all have stories around how this gentleman must feel.
Yeah, I've never really seen too many people that have been disappointed about saving too much money for retirement. However, I do have I have seen it on the other way though. I have a client who she's regretted. The only reason she's regretted having so much money is she could have spent more time with her husband, who was very ill, and she was more concerned, or not more concerned. She was very concerned about them having enough money to make it, because she knew the cost of long-term care was exorbitant, and she was so worried about that she kept working and focusing on the work, that when he passed away, she's like, doggone it, that's too much money. I wish I would have spent more time with him. And so that's the only time I've really heard that. But it was very telling, though, and something I keep in mind when working with clients.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know in all of my years of experience, I have actually yet to meet that person. So the good news is you can plan for it, but it is difficult to actually save too much for retirement. So, Mike, what dollar figure should people consider being right for them? How much is really enough?
Everybody's different. You know, there's some rules of thumb. One of them that we've used kind of quick when somebody doesn't know exactly what it is, we say, okay, what's 70 to 80% of your expenses in the past, or current expenses when you're going to retirement. But I generally have my clients do a little bit more homework and figure out, okay, once the kids are out the door and hopefully there's not a lot of debt, what are your expenses going to be then? Again, it's different for everybody, so I don't know if any one rule of thumb fits, but we do have the go-tos. If somebody doesn't have it, we can use as just kind of a starting point, but then we can get more detailed.
Yeah, is that kind of your preferred method, Mike?
Yes.
So let's talk through some of those estimation options that you talked about.
Sure. Again, this is one estimation option. You say, okay, if you want to travel a lot, you may aim to replace 100% or even 110% of your pre-retirement income, and then you kind of back into. You start with that, then you say, okay, well, I've got Social Security and maybe have a pension, may have different areas where money's coming in, so you may not need to replace as much as you think, but we kind of, from your portfolio at least. And then there's the rule of 20. So for every dollar of retirement income, you need $20 saved in your retirement portfolio. And then the last one here is age-based. So using a benchmark like saving your annual income by age 30. So and then 3 times your annual income by the age of 45, and then 6 times by age 60. And you know, those are good rules of thumb to get started, especially if you're younger. You know, if you're in your 20s, that's kind of good to say, because you talk to a lot of 20-year-olds, they don't know when the heck they're going to retire. They're not even thinking about that. See, when you're talking to them, you can say, hey, let's just shoot for this. We know you don't know when you're going to retire. We don't know what you're going to be making in the future, but at least to get the ball rolling.
Sure, that makes great sense. And if only everyone at the age of 30 was already thinking through retirement, that would probably save a lot of time and pain. So what if you think that you don't have enough money?
Well, there's various ways to approach that. You know, I have clients that, as a matter of fact, that came in a couple weeks ago that said they're ready to retire, and they gave me a new number and for their retirement goal, and I asked them, did you guys, in this number, because it looked kind of low to me, and I said, in this number, did you have health care? And they're like, no, we didn't have health care in there. So the cost of health care can be pretty high, so we have to be very careful of that. So we did that, and it didn't look great, but then they went and they reevaluated their budget. It just happened that their daughter's living at home right now, and they, you know, they're talking to her about she's just about ready to start her career, and so they took expenses out that would be additional if she was there. So we tweaked it and we looked at it a little bit more. We also put a little bit of part-time work in there, so and they're still able to hit their goal. But it worked out fine. But again, you see these situations with a lot of different people.
Sure. Is it pretty common for you when you have someone who comes into your office to find themselves in this situation?
It happens a lot, but I've gotten pretty good at being soft about it and just helping game plan. I'm a coach, a wealth coach, and my job is to teach people and help them reach their goals. And so these aren't any new challenges to me, and everybody's got these challenges.
Right, makes sense. So how does where somebody's going to live impact their retirement?
Sure, it impacts it a lot. I have some clients who say that, or their plan is actually to sell their house in Cocoa Beach and to buy an RV and go travel around the country. So that's the way they wanted to do it. And then I have others that say that they want to keep their house, and then they're going to go buy an RV anyways and still go travel. At least they'll have having their base station or their base home is nice for a lot of people. But some people don't care, and they're just going to travel around, and after they get done traveling, they're going to decide where they're going to land. And who knows, they may find a place that they want to live outside of Florida. I'm not sure why people would want to live outside of Florida, but that happens. But everybody's got their different situations. Some may want to buy when they finally land. They might want to buy, or they might want to rent as well, but they don't want to be tied into one specific area.
Yeah, and I think it also sort of goes without saying that, your home structure needs to support your physical well-being as you age, and sometimes proximity comes into play as well. If you've got children who have lived in the same state for years and they decide to leave that state and maybe start a family somewhere else, that can also, encourage people to take a look at the location and maybe change where they're living.
Right.
So moving right along, let's tackle challenge number 2, which is where do you know how you want to spend your time in retirement? So Mike, can you talk through those 3 main phases of retirement?
Sure. Early retirement is that there's a big transition there. I think that you see it a lot of times where people think that they're going to just start off and relax and just golf all day, but then they realize that, hey, you know what, I want to do some more things. I want to travel and be more active and maybe do volunteer work. And then in the middle stage is probably more family, getting a little more cerebral about the way things are going and everything, and again, maybe even do some more volunteer work, kind of get in your groove as far as retirement goes. And then the later stage, you'd rather it be all family and fun stuff, but a lot of times in your later life, you end up having to deal with healthcare issues, and you want to make sure that you enjoy the early and the middle as well, just to make sure that you don't regret not doing anything in your later life.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And with each one of these phases of retirement, are they all static?
No, they're not static. They're constantly changing. So like in the beginning, you have the fantasy of retirement, and then you say, okay, it could be 1 to 3 years. You're excited about it, and then as far as you get a little stressed out when that time comes, that it's the transition time to retirement, and I see that happen a lot. And then as you kind of get into a routine over the 3 to 6 year time period, where you say, okay, maybe you've got the consistent volunteer work you're doing, or maybe even a part-time job that you really like. When money's not a necessity, a lot of times individuals end up finding jobs that they really like. And actually, I've seen a lot of times where clients don't have to worry about their money, and they do consulting, and they make a lot of money doing that. So it really works out well. And when you don't have to worry about something, there's no stress, and oftentimes you do better. And then the reorientation, again, oftentimes you see, you say, okay, well, I want to do some other things, and maybe you go back to work. And I see that movie with Robert De Niro, is where the intern, where he's not worried about money, but he wants to have more of a purpose and help an organization grow, and that's what he does there. And then you get contentment after that, and just kind of get on a good path.
Yeah, definitely. And the good news is there's numerous studies out there that show that as we get older, we get happier. So that's something for all of us to look forward to, no doubt. And as it relates to goals in retirement, I always find this one really interesting, because if you look at your whole life leading up to retirement, you've always had goals, whether it was in elementary school when you were trying out for a specific sports team, or in high school, maybe vying for the lead in the high school play, or targeting a specific college, studying for some specific topics so that you could become a subject matter expert and get into a specific corporation, climb the corporate ladder, personal goals like backpacking through Europe, or even settling down and having a family. I think that it's really interesting when you look at goals overall, and how oftentimes people don't think about them once they get into retirement. Retirement seems to be the goal rather than all the things that you're doing in retirement. What are your thoughts on that, Mike?
Well, that's why with our financial planning software, we can actually, it's very interactive, and we can individualize each of these goals and say, okay, I want to go fishing a couple times a year, I have a big fishing expedition, or I want to spend X time or X money on grandchildren. And we can put part-time work in there, as well as maybe income coming in to help fund some of these other goals. Not all of them have a dollar amount, but a lot of them do. So we kind of just weigh it out when we're going through the process. And our financial planning is very interactive and collaborative with the clients. It's not like it was a long time ago where, where we didn't have the great software that we have now, where a lot of financial planners would do a financial plan, and it would be put in a desk either for the client for a long time, and then every couple of years or 3 years you would reevaluate it. And but now we do it on a consistent basis, and it really works out well. But everybody's got their own things that they want to take care of, and we customize it for everybody.
Do any of your clients share the same goals? Do you see any consistency with that?
Sure, I see travel being a lot, and being in Florida, I see fishing a lot as well. I have one client who was at Lockheed Martin, and he retired, and he does big fishing expeditions. He does photography, and when he does his photography, like right now, he's planning a trip to Antarctica where he's going to do a dive. So he's going to fish, I believe, and also do some scuba diving and take pictures, and he also writes articles. And I'm going to put that in my one of his wife's experiences on our blog that he's written for me.
Yes, pretty adventuresome indeed. When you take a look at retirement, I know that there's sort of these 4 categories to consider, work and social activities, and then hobbies and interests, and of course your bucket list. Can you talk through those for me?
Sure. A lot of times they all kind of go together, and what happens to a lot of people with me is with work, a lot of your social activities come from that. And you got to make sure that when you're planning for your retirement, you think about, if you're going to do any kind of work, what are you going to do socially? Because you don't want to just say, I'm going to golf all the time, and you want to figure out what type of people you want to hang out with, and if you're going to hang out with your own people. Like I know people that have had big windfalls when they're younger, and they say, I'm retired. Well, all their buddies aren't retired. So you got to think about that too. I have a college buddy who, when he was like 45 years old, sold the business. So I have other friends that know him real better than I do, and they always want to travel, and it's hard to keep up with them. So not everybody can hang with them. So you got to think about that. what you're going to do when you're retired as far as socially, and
Sure.
your bucket list. What do you want to do long term? And things change on an ongoing basis too, and that's why the plan is very dynamic that we work with.
Yeah, definitely. And I always find it's interesting too when working with couples how when you start talking through some of these hobbies and interests and maybe what their goals are as it relates to social activities and work, sometimes those things don't always align, which leads us to our next section, which is, are your core values aligned with your goals?
Right. And it's very important to keep those in mind. You know, if you like spending time with family, definitely, and they don't live where you live, well, in your budget you should put travel time to go see families. Or if the family doesn't have a lot of money, travel time for them and funds available to help them travel to you. Relationships, all the different areas that are very important to you. It could be a charity. It could be various organizations where you like helping others. And then even your religious life is very important to many people, and you got to make sure that comes into play. And just the fact that you're retiring doesn't mean that you're going to stop giving to your church or giving to organizations. So you need to budget that as well.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And how do you think that, work fits in with all of this? What does work provide for people? It's a bit more complex than oftentimes we think of it.
Yeah, it's complex. All these different areas come into it. Hopefully by the time you're retired, the financial stability is not going to be as big of an issue, but status and your purpose, those are two very important areas. And then also, again, like I mentioned earlier, social. I mean, my brother and my other partner, they're friends of mine too, and we like spending time together. So if I retire, then I'm not going to get to go to lunch with those guys as much as I do, and do the things that just in game plan and talk about the things that we have in common. So we have to keep that in mind when we're retiring, and structure is very important too.
Yeah, definitely. And the good news is there's a lot of replacement activities for all of these things. You bring up status, and I know, Mike, you have talked about before having your clients who have retired, they decide to join a board as an example, to be able to maintain some of that status and purpose and structure and all of those good things.
Yeah, I'm on a couple boards myself, and one of the gentlemen who's on the Parish Medical Center board with me, he retired Navy, I believe. I think he's an admiral, and he's on like two or three different boards, and that really keeps him busy, and he loves it. And he helps out people so much with it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
As far as spending time in retirement, you have, before you retire, you have only so many hours in the week that you've got to fill, but work helps fill that a lot. So you really have you have limited free time to go tailgate and go to football games and go to church and do all that stuff and spend time with family, and then there's sleep. But then when you're retired, you pretty much double that, and you don't want to just not have a plan for that, because if you don't have a plan and you don't have fulfillment in that 112 hours of free time, a lot of times that 56 hours of sleep isn't going to be great sleep either. I like to be getting tired by the time I'm going to bed.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's also interesting because if you look at a 7-day week and during your working life, if you take a look at a weekend or a vacation as an example, those things provide a break from work. If you remove work from the equation and you just have 112 hours of free time, then you have no break. And it seems funny that you would need a break from free time, but I oftentimes see that people in retirement end up inserting back in work to, in general, create that break.
Right.
So now that we've reviewed a couple of core challenges people encounter, let's move on to challenge number 3, which is, have you estimated how long you're going to live? Kind of a heavy question.
Yeah, there's a question out there, or there's been a study that says the first 150-year-old has been born. And
wow.
You want to make sure that you're going to have enough money. I don't know how long we're all going to live, but I also don't want my clients to die and spend that last dollar the day they die or the year they die.
Sure,
and some people jokingly say that. Yeah, you want to make sure that there's still money left over.
Definitely.
What if you're wrong?
Yeah, absolutely. That planning aspect of longevity is key. I mean, just look at this chart.
Yeah, so these are percentages of, so men at age 65, they've got a 58% chance of living to age 80, 17% chance of hitting age 90, and then a 6% of 95. Women, they keep them around. They kill the guys off earlier than the women. So I'm not sure how that worked out, but it just did. And 68% of age 65-year-old women are going to make going to make it to 80, and then 31 to 90, and then 12% to 95. And for some reason, again, I guess there's less stress for couples and they have a better chance of making it to those various ages and living longer.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, especially considering that this study was done in 2011. So, medical advances and healthcare, all of those things keep getting better and better to keep us around. Mike, why do you think so many people underestimate their own longevity?
I think, for one, they may only look at one factor, where would be like how long their parents have lived, without looking at what their lifestyle was like. But also, generally, we sometimes get pessimistic as well.
Yeah.
Especially
yep.
if they said if their money's going to be, if they look at it and say their money's running short, and they're like, there's no way I don't have that great of a chance of making it to live to 90. Well, I don't think I'm ever going to live that long.
Yeah, as they say, attitude is everything.
Yeah. So attitude's everything, and it's very important. And most of my 90-plus-year-old clients, they're happy, productive people that aren't pessimistic. They look at the world and they say, okay, well, I've got my family, I've got the things that I can control, and I'm going to do those things. My oldest client, she just passed away when she was 103. And she was one of the happiest people that I'd love spending time with, and I've learned something from her every time I met with her.
Sure. I think it goes a little bit to the contentment stages that you had pointed out earlier as well, is that we get a little bit happier as we get older. And per the quote on the screen, some people are old at 18 and some people are young at 90. So it's always something to consider, but certainly being able to see that silver lining can make a big difference for people.
And I see a lot of times where, especially we get flooded with news all the time. And if somebody doesn't fill in that free time with good, positive things to do and keeping active, we sit at home watching the news. And or we go on our phones and look at the news all the time, and it can be very depressing. And so that can take away a lot of the contentment. So being active is very important.
Yeah, definitely. And also a good question to sort of ask yourself, I think, is, if you didn't know how old you are, how old would you be? Ask yourself if you feel at least, 5 to 10 years younger than your actual age. And I think most people end up answering that question with the fact that they really do feel younger than their actual age. So, Mike, how would one go about estimating how long they were going to live?
Sure, you research your family history. There's times where, say if somebody was adopted, they may not know all their family history. But you look at the other areas, consider your lifestyle at all ages up to now. And that's big. And like when we were in college, maybe we got a little more wild and didn't care as much about keeping active or staying up really late. And then you also have leveraging your health benefits, making sure you know what your health benefits are as retirement benefits from work, or if you have to go get your own benefits from on the outside world, your private insurance. then understanding your partner's health and well-being can also be directly impact yours. I've seen many times where one spouse is healthy and the other spouse isn't, and what that does is it's very taxing for the healthy spouse and affects them on a daily basis and tires them out, and a lot of times they end up getting sick as well. So you have to be very careful of that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a big piece of the equation, unfortunately. And I know, Mike, that you also work really closely with your clients on, helping them decipher and sort of translate all of the benefits and resources that are available to them. So that's another huge thing that I think leads us directly into challenge number 4, which is, have you properly planned for the cost of health care? So can you talk through sort of spending in retirement and the perception versus the reality for folks?
Sure. In regards to the perception of early retirement, that's pretty close to reality, but as you get a little further along, the expenses are a little higher than people think, especially with health care. The health insurance, the cost of health insurance, the average for a Lockheed Martin retiree, say for a couple, can be about $12,000. That's including, on an annualized basis, including out-of-pocket expenses. Generally, the cost goes down a little bit as you're, in your 70s, but when you're in your mid to late 80s and going to 90s, then the cost of healthcare can go way up, and especially for long-term care. Long-term care can be $90,000 a year or more. If there's Alzheimer's in the family, or if you have Alzheimer's or dementia, the cost is very exorbitant, and you have to properly plan for that. If you don't like the idea of insurance, then you say, okay, well, how are we going to fund it? Are you going to self-fund if something happens there? And we run the numbers to see if it's going to work well. And some people just say they want to take a calculated risk with it. But
yeah.
we keep all those in mind when we're doing it. And also the cost of healthcare can be 4% higher as far as the inflation factor every year. And we see it happen all the time. The cost of healthcare go up.
Yeah, definitely. And that's always the thing with our health and well-being. But the good news is there are a lot of different items that you can control. So can we talk through those for a minute?
Sure. Yeah, your physical activity is very important in your daily routine. Eating right, your frame of mind, choosing to be happy. I was reading a book by Andy Andrews, and it's The Traveler's Gift. And one of the main things in Traveler's Gift is you're choosing to be happy. And no matter what situation you're in, you're choosing to be happy and trying to be positive. The getting good sleep and rest and exercise. And again, one study I've seen is that it's so easy to carry your life with you, even to your bedroom and with your iPhone, and looking at Facebook, looking at social media or the news when you're getting ready to go to bed, get all worked up, and then you don't get to fall asleep for a little while. So put that thing away. And I'm not sitting on some high pedestal. That's something I challenge. It's a challenge of mine.
Yeah.
So I just try to put the phone away and don't mess with it. And I'm trying to exercise more, and exercise is very important. So you want to eat healthy, have regular checkups, don't smoke. You manage your stress by exercise and being very active, and stay mentally active, and manage your emotional well-being. And that's one thing we try to help our clients with as much as we possibly can, give them alternatives.
Yeah, definitely. And I know that you're looking at oftentimes a 30-year period of time for individuals and couples, and there's a lot of ups and downs that are tucked into that. So you point back to managing stress and managing emotional well-being. Those become really, really critical for just making sure that you can keep everything together.
Yeah, and you want to make sure you're keeping active, because if you're active, then you have an emotional thing happen, like a family member pass away, or just an event happen like that, where if you're just sitting around the house, you're just going to think about that all the time, and it's going to be more prevalent in your mind. But if you're active, it's going to take time away from that, and it's not going to make it seem as terrible a situation that it could be if you weren't active.
Absolutely, and also the good news here is that there's things that you can control, things that you can do in order to stay ahead of it.
Right, like understanding your health care benefits and your estimated costs. Like I mentioned before, it can be very expensive. So review your insurance options. There are options out there like these co-ops now. There's co-ops that pre-Medicare that you can look into, and I have 2 or 3 clients that are actually on them. They started out on like faith-based organizations, groups of people together, but I don't believe it's all faith-based organizations anymore. They're alternatives to normal health insurance. But also be aware of your family history. Plan for the unexpected, because we don't want Murphy to come out and change our way of life. We want it to be an inconvenience, but not life-altering. And definitely you want to document. Document by doing your estate planning. Have your financial plan and your estate planning documents together, where they're easily accessible and organized. And then communicate it. Communicate to your beneficiaries, but also communicate with the people that are going to be powers of attorney for you, or going to be your healthcare advocate. You want to make sure they know, because you don't want it to be a surprise if you can't speak for yourself and you put somebody on as your contingent power of attorney, where they didn't realize that they were going to be helping you out until that time comes and somebody knocks on their door saying, or gets a phone call saying, well, Bill needs help and you're his power of attorney. Well, I didn't even know that, but so you want to plan.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's something that's pretty freeing in that planning process. I think sometimes there's more fear associated with the unknown than, what's the reality of the situation. So if you go through this exercise and you are communicating on a regular basis with the people you love and the people that would be impacted, as well as the resources, it can really make a huge difference for everyone.
Yeah, and as far as communication, bring in, as you get a little bit older, maybe bring in kids to financial planning meetings with us, or your other financial advisor, and make sure that they're aware of things, so that there's no surprises there. And also, that's time to educate. If what we've seen before is a lot of times where parents keep everything separate, they don't tell their kids anything, or they only tell one child something and don't tell others the other. So you want to educate everybody.
Yeah, definitely. And going back to that longevity conversation and the fact that we have a lot of control around our own health and well-being, can you talk through this study of increasing our chances to live longer? Sure.
High alcohol, I just look at the extremes here, and the high alcohol consumption, low exercise, you smoke a lot, you don't eat any vegetables. I have a friend of mine who says, well, I don't need to eat vegetables, I take that pill. So he's got a pill to keep his cholesterol down, and I don't know if that's going to work out well for him long term or not.
Right.
He has a high alcohol consumption as well.
Yeah, ignore those side effects.
He doesn't smoke, but he does exercise a lot. But that could reduce your chances by 35% if you're a male, and 47% for women. On the other extreme, it works out better if you do have a low alcohol consumption, exercise a lot, and you also don't smoke, and you eat a proper balanced diet. It affects us all. It's interesting how it affects women and men differently, though. But everybody's got their things that they do, and I think the key is moderation.
Yeah,
definitely moderation.
I would agree. I'd agree with that.
I don't want to get too carried away with my exercise.
Yeah, there you go. So we've talked about a number of different challenges which really lead into our fifth and final challenge, which is that dynamic financial plan and obviously foundations of financial comfort. What are those three foundations that are so critical, Mike?
Sure. You want to make sure you don't make your life too complicated. I've seen people have investments with various investment advisors who maybe aren't financial planners. A lot of times where you have various investment accounts, you have one account working against the other, and not everybody knows your goals. So you want to make sure that your investments are working along with your plan, and have an investment portfolio that's not too complicated, because that's not the most important part. Diversification is very important, and according to your risk tolerance and according to your plan. Then also having a budget. You want to make sure that you have, at least in the beginning, have a good platform to base what your expenses are going to be. And that rule of thumbs are great, but you want to make sure the budget is appropriate for your situation, and having a plan. Sure. It's amazing, by having a plan, how it kind of brings everything together. Even if things look pretty dire at some point, if you have a plan and something to focus on, either in business or financial planning, it usually works out the right way, because you can tweak it and you can hone in on various areas. Like I have clients that are younger that have a lot of debt they need to take care of. So we help them zero in on that debt and take care of that debt. But otherwise, if they don't have a plan to take care of their debt, it generally just keeps going and going and going, and working against their overall financial plan.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. Let's dig in for a moment to simplification and sort of the three components of that.
Sure. In the simplification, you obviously want to be organized. You set goals on an annual basis. You have your long-term goals, your mid-term goals, and your short-term goals. So we often talk about that with our clients. And then you want to, again, consolidate, and not just investments, but you also want to consolidate bank accounts. Very often it gets too complicated. And back to the communication, you want to make sure even spouses are communicating properly. I have spouses who, fortunately, they communicated well, but one spouse didn't like coming to the meetings as much as the other spouse. So when the main planner spouse passed away, fortunately, they left really good notes, and we talked a lot. But I had recently a client pass away, and I spent the first meeting, planning meeting with his wife and his daughter, was like a 6-hour meeting. So we brought in lunch, and it ended up being, we got out around 4 o'clock. So it was a long day, but it was very productive, though. And that's one of the things that is very important when you're looking for a financial advisor too. You want a financial advisor who can talk to both spouses, and because that's very important.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's oftentimes common in very traditional households. I know my dad for sure was always taking the lead on anything that was financial, and it wasn't until recent years that he started to tuck my mom into those conversations. It's definitely, it may not be her favorite thing, but it's definitely necessary for her to be involved in those conversations. And I know.
The other way too.
Yeah, absolutely. It sure can. It sure can. As it relates to all of these things, life gets complicated, and it's fortunate for all of us that it's long, but you end up with stuff all over the place, and it can be really easy to not be organized and forget about the things that we need to communicate on.
Right.
So as far as buckets to budget for, can you talk through this general approach we have up on screen?
Sure. The everyday budget may be appropriate for from the Social Security or your pension, and maybe taking a little bit from your portfolio. But as far as you want to make sure that there's some discretionary funds, either in your savings account or in your investments, where if you call up Mike, Frank, or Dave and say, hey, guys, I need a little extra money to go buy an RV, or we're going to go on a vacation, can we do that? And that's another reason why you want to make sure that your portfolio is a very well-designed portfolio and liquid, a good percentage of it, very liquid, where we can take money out of, where and have different buckets as far as that goes, where if the markets are not doing as well, we've planned for that, and we have money set aside where we can take money from in the areas that haven't been too volatile. And then kind of leads back into the unexpected, where where Murphy comes to play. At Murphy's Law, we wanted to make sure that we have money set away for that. Or also, in a lot of times, more and more now, there's the boomerang kid. The boomerang kid comes back home, and you want to make sure that you're planning for that as well.
Yeah, definitely falls into the unexpected category with, you know, things like home repair and sometimes healthcare-related expenses.
Right.
So that moves us right into sort of the steps of creating a financial plan. Can you talk through these three elements?
Sure. It's very collaborative with our clients. You know, you design a plan for them. You say, okay, what do you have? Where do you want to go? So what are we going to do to get there? So we design that plan. We design a very flexible plan that we can make adjustments along the way. So then we build it. And so again, we're building that flexible financial plan that has estate planning, tax planning, retirement planning, your investment portfolio, everything working together. And then we want to protect it. So we want to make sure that, again, you're doing the proper estate planning and tax planning, and looking at all the different areas and knowing where to take money from so it doesn't affect you negatively, and everything's working together.
Yeah, definitely. How often, Mike, do you review the financial plan with your clients?
It depends on the client, but we could look at it a couple times a year, as much as that client would need, being that if they're getting ready to have a life transition, either kids going to school or getting ready to retire, then maybe in that year we look at it a lot more.
Yep.
With our financial planning software, you can also have your own portal. Clients can have their own portal. So I see that often. I get notified when that happens, and I see clients that are getting ready to transition that they pop up going into their portal a lot more than people that are
sure.
a little ways from retirement or into retirement. But
yeah,
generally
that definitely makes
every
sense.
year, 1 to 2 years that we look at it.
Great. And let's talk through these 4 fun categories as they relate to somebody taking a look at their own situation and figuring out how prepared they are.
Well, usually the main areas that we do see, I don't see it a lot, is the unprepared and confident. But you do see it where you've got to bring somebody back down to earth and say, okay, well, you're not, you have some hard work to do. A lot of times, a lot of my clients are, when they first come in, are comfortable and concerned. So they have a written plan on their own. A lot of, like, say, some of my engineering clients that from Lockheed have come in with in their initial meeting with me with a spreadsheet, and they say, I think I'm good. But my wife and I think we're good. We have this spreadsheet where we have our own inflation factor and everything. We want to see what you guys come up with. And then when we put that plan together, oftentimes it ends up being for the far right, where it's comfortable. They're comfortable and confident, and we work through that plan. And again, you want to make sure it's dynamic, and we can make changes as we're going along.
Yeah, definitely, with the goal of getting everyone to that green category. So what are the next steps and actions for our attendees today?
Well, if you've just been going off those rules of thumb as far as retirement, make sure that you actually put pen to paper and find out what you're actually going to need for retirement, and consider how you want to spend your time in retirement. Again, that's an area that a lot of people haven't even thought about. Do you estimate how long you're going to live? So then you plan for the real cost of health care. And I lean on in my planning, I lean on very realistic, and sometimes even go on the more pessimistic side on that. Let's put it conservative, just to make sure that we're planning a little more, plan for the worst and hope for the best. And then formalize your financial plan for comfort. And then also, if there's a client that needs help, we can always do that. But also, if there's somebody who's not a client, they can contact us, and we can set up a time to get together for a free initial consultation. So our website is www.sfmadvisorgroup.com. I have a blog on there that we put various information on there. We usually do it weekly, and there's other really good stuff, good information and stuff on that blog, and then also on the website as well. Good educational information, and we do have an app, and then also my email, mike@sfmadvisorgroup.com.
Great. It's been great walking through these common challenges with you, Mike. So I'd like to actually open it up now for our question and answer session. Again, to ask a question, please go to the GoToWebinar control panel by clicking on the orange icon with an arrow. Type your questions into the box and hit send. Your questions will not be viewable by the other attendees. And it actually looks like along the way we actually got 2 questions. Mike, the first one is, what do you see as it relates to trends in pensions?
Well, trends in pensions on the private sector, they're going away, generally. Like Lockheed froze their pension for current employees and people that have the pension, and for new people coming in, there's no pension at all. And other organizations like hospital, I'm on the pension board, that pension's been froze as well. So we ought to make sure we do additional planning to supplement our retirement.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And the second question is, are you familiar with all of the Lockheed Martin plans that are available to their employees?
Sure, I'm familiar with the Lockheed Martin plans and various plans with other organizations as well. But Lockheed, like their DMICP, their deferred comp, and the non-qualified salary and savings plan as well, and the various plans and the innuendos with those various different specific situations with each one, and their restricted stock.
Sure.
So those are things that we work with a lot.
Yeah, I don't doubt it. I know that it's a complicated world for sure. So